Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, May 3rd. Hatsqualawin, Quistalukmuk, Laskaholmish, Okmeo. We are privileged to be meeting tonight on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Council, we have an amended agenda in front of us. There were some minor changes to the item 8A1. This is our election and assent voting bylaw. And then also under 10B8 in our consent agenda is a letter to the parties about the transit strike. That's been added to the agenda. There were some additional minor minute amendments, and that's the agenda before you. Does someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, any notice of motion? Seeing none, we do not have anything under delegations or proclamations this evening. Under item 5, consideration of unscheduled public attendance. This is anyone who has business that's not on the agenda tonight that feels they cannot wait until 2 weeks from now at our next regular business meeting. Seeing none. Don't have a public hearing tonight, but we do have an item under item 7, community plan and infrastructure, a section 57 notice for 2101 Mamquam Road. I will turn it over to staff for their presentation, and then there is an opportunity for the homeowner or their representative to speak as well.
Thank you. As you said, Mayor and Council, this is an enforcement file for 2101 Mamquam Road. Everyone's seeing my screen, it seems like. The objective here is to bring the property located at 2101 Mamquam Road into compliance with the BC Building Code and our building bylaw. The non-compliant home located at 2101 Mamquam Road is a relatively new home. It received occupancy approval in October of 2021. In October of 2021, the building department received a complaint about about unpermitted construction. So the building department did do an investigation, and we did confirm that there had been an alteration to the lower floor of the house, which falls within floodplain, to create 2 unpermitted suites. There is also a covenant or a flood covenant on title that prohibits that type of construction as well. We have been in contact with the owner. The building department has been in contact with the owner throughout the course. And there is a plan to put this back into compliance. So we have 2 motions to put forward tonight. The first motion is that council instructs the corporate officer to file a building bylaw and building code contravention notice under section 57 of the charter, respecting the property described as Lot 1, Block E, south half of southeast quarter, Section 11, Township 50, New Westminster Plan EPP 76291, and located at 2101 Mamquam Road. And that would be at the Land Title and Survey Authority of BC under 57. The second notice respecting the same property would be that council instructs the corporate officer in her discretion to commence legal action or proceeding in relation to this property should compliance not be achieved within 3 months of today's meeting. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Council. Councillor Race.
Thank you. I'm just curious, how might compliance happen?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, the lower floor of the property is entirely within floodplain, so it would have to be returned back to its originally approved state, which was a percentage of the lower floor was crawl space. A percentage was a foyer, and the remainder was a garage. So the garage and the foyer are 2 exemptions within the floodplain. You're allowed to have those. And there can be no other living space beyond that. So we'd ask that it be returned back to its original crawl space.
And how might it be returned? I mean, is this a matter of tearing out foundations, or I've heard in other municipalities of the space actually being filled in some permanent manner? Could you expand on that?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. Yeah, it was originally filled in. It was filled in to within 4'11" of the underside of floor joist or ceiling space. So that would, once you're 4'11", as per the BC Building Code, you're no longer considered living space. So we're looking for a permanent solution where it would get filled in so that it can't be returned to unpermitted or sorry, habitable space.
Any other questions? Councillor Stoner?
Staff mentioned that there was a plan to bring the property back into compliance. Can you just speak to timelines of that and where the Section 57 comes into play in order to enforce that?
Absolutely. Through you, Mayor Elliott. The intention of the Section 57 primarily is to make this public so that in the event the property goes up for sale, someone doesn't inadvertently inherit this problem. The timeline, there has been some discussion with staff, with the homeowner. There hasn't been a sort of a locked down timeline, but we'd like to see this expedited so that we can remove the risk and sort of put that aside. So that's why we're asking for the 3 months. And obviously staff's willing to work with the homeowner to put this solution into play. But that's a reasonable timeline based on risk. Thank you.
Councillor Herford?
Thank you. Once the property achieves compliance, and what's the mechanism for removing does the 57 get removed, or is this something that follows the property because this is an issue that's happened inside that structure, or what happens there?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. Yes, so under Section 58 of the Charter gives the opportunity to remove it. So as per our bylaw, there is a fee the homeowner would pay. I think it's $500 once they have achieved compliance. From there, staff would send a recommendation through to Legislative Services, and then it would be removed as per under 58. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. Has there been any challenge in obtaining compliance or moving towards compliance with this file?
At this point, this is as far as we've gotten. There's been some discussion. There's been notification of the staff's recommendation for notice. But like I said, there hasn't been really a timeline established or solidified. So this is sort of the first steps in achieving that.
And we may have been remiss in getting you to introduce yourselves at the beginning of your presentation.
I apologize. Sorry, Mayor. My name is Chad William with the Building Department, and this is my colleague, Harshan Dhaliwal.
Harshan, is this your first time in council?
Yes, Mayor Elliott.
Welcome. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but it's nice to see you here.
Thank you.
All right. Council doesn't have any questions at this time. And so this is an opportunity for the homeowner or their representative to speak. And I know these can be uncomfortable, but we invite you to come up to the podium and just tell us who you are and if you're the homeowner or the representative. And then you can say what you like to council. We may have some questions for you.
Hi, my name is Sharon. I'm the homeowner for 2101 Mamquam Road, and she's my sister, and she's my sister-in-law. So they can represent. Thank you.
Honorable City Council, my name is Sarah Sangera, and I'm speaking behalf of Sharanjit Chima, who is my younger sister.
Hello, Honorable Council. My name is Jaspreet Sidhu. I'm Sharon's sister-in-law, and I will also be speaking on her behalf tonight.
Honorable Council, we agree with the municipality that the secondary suite was built without a permit and permission from the city at the address of 2101 Mamquam Road. We do not disagree with the municipality on this matter. However, we would like to bring your attention the circumstances that caused Sharon to build this secondary suite. In mid-2019, Sharon and her husband bought a lot 2101 Mamquam Road and started the process of building their home. They submitted their permit and they sorted through their financial plan. They were approved for the construction mortgage based on their construction budget in 2019. Things were going as planned for Sharon and her husband. A little bit of background for her. Sharon and her husband have been resident of Squamish for the past 23 years. They have both been working as a housekeeping staff in Whistler for past 23 years and obtaining stable full-time position at their representative workplace. Over the years, they have worked extremely hard to put them in a position to be able to purchase their lot and to build a home for them and for their 3 children. However, come March of 2020, as Sharon was building her home, the pandemic hit. Sharon and her husband both were immediately laid off due to the provincial restrictions. They did not go to work for the period of 3 months. Even when restrictions were eased, they were only offered part-time shifts for the remainder of the year due to the major decrease of tourism. At this time, in addition to decrease of household income, the cost of building materials also skyrocketed. For Sharon at this time, the cost of completing the home was now more than the mortgage Sharon was approved for. The stress for this caused strain on a household. Sharon's husband fell into depression and was no longer capable of working. Currently, Sharon's husband is no longer living with her and he is attending the rehab. Being a single income earner in her family at this time, Sharon decided to obtain a second job. She therefore became a licensed security guard. She started work both as a housekeeper and a security guard. And most of the time she's working 80 hours a week. Despite working 2 jobs, Sharon still ran out of funds to complete her home. She had exhausted her construction mortgage. Sharon was denied any extension to her funds. To Sharon completing her home, we as a family extended our line of credits to loan Sharon money to complete her home in a short term. As Sharon's home neared completion, she tried once again to apply for an additional mortgage to pay back the loan we had extended to her. However, with the loss of her own income in 2020 and her husband no longer working, Sharon was getting approved for any additional funding. As a single mother with 3 children, Sharon faces a tough decision ahead of her. As per Sharon mortgage broker, the only way she could approve the additional funding was if she had a secondary suite that would provide her with rental income. Facing desperation, Sharon decided that she would build a suite to show the bank and obtain financing and pay off her debts. In this time of desperation, Sharon unfortunately did not consider the consequences of her action at this time. Sharon would like to apologize to the council and the municipality for her action. She humbly accepts that she did something that was not permitted. She would like to share with council that it was never her intention to cause any harm or ill intent. As noticed, once Sharon got a work stop order, she immediately stopped any work on a secondary suites. The suites were never rented out. Currently, the suites are left as an empty storage area. At this time, Sharon is requesting from council that the area designated to be a crawl space be allowed to remain as an empty storage area. This would be similar to Sharon's neighbors who have a similar house design and are utilizing their crawl space as a storage unit. Sharon is willing to pay extra property tax as required for the additional storage area. She is also willing to comply with any inspections the municipality may want to conduct to ensure this space is not utilized as a living or rental space. Sharon would like to continue to be an active member of our community and raise her children in Squamish. Thank you, Honorable Council.
Thank you, Council.
Council, do you have any questions for the representatives? All right, I'm not seeing any questions from council. And thank you for representing your sister.
Okay, thank you.
And Council, any further questions for staff or comments? Council Race and then Council Pettingill.
Thank you. Can you tell me, is the space plumbed or wired?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. Yes, to the best of my knowledge, it has been wired. It has had plumbing added to the lower floor, or to what was crawl space.
And in your view, is it possible to leave the space intact, but to ensure that it would not be used for rental or occupation by removing wiring, for example, or removing plumbing?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. I mean, anything is possible. I suppose the issue that staff, or the concern that staff has, is related to it being considered living space, which is then in contravention with bylaw and BC Building Code. One option is that the space be reduced to a height no greater than 4'11", like I had mentioned before. I suppose there's a number of ways what that can be achieved practically. That obviously would reduce likelihood of it being used as living space, and also be in compliance with bylaw.
And would that then more or less leave it as part of the crawl space, which would be available for use as storage?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, yes, that's correct. If it's not greater than 4'11", it isn't considered living space. Which yes, I mean your height is reduced potentially, but it would then be considered as crawl space. And how you use your crawl space within floodplain, obviously, it can't be used for equipment damageable by floodwaters, which would be part of the covenant already on title. But beyond that, how you use your crawl space is sort of up to you.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, so is it right now essentially crawl space with plumbing and wiring, or the floor, something cement was dug out and so it's a full height space now?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. Yeah, it was dug out. It was originally less than 5 feet. That space that was filled was removed to create a full height lower floor, and then turned into living space. So it would have to be brought back, so either framed up or framed down, if you will, in order to achieve that reduced height.
Okay, thank you. And my understanding is if you are looking for support from a bank for a mortgage and relying on a suite, they require some degree of evidence that the money is there from suite revenue. Do we have any knowledge of whether or not banks consistently look for permits and that sort of thing as part of that process, or is that something we're just not clear on?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. My only experience is on occasion when there are insurance type issues, or let's say after a fire, we sometimes have some communication with insurance companies to discuss the status of a property, but not generally beforehand, not during the process of permitting, et cetera. That's typically just between the applicant for a mortgage and their bank. We have little to no involvement.
Continue, and then I'll go to Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, do we have like a ballpark, like order of magnitude is addressing sort of making this not habitable one way or another? Is this a $50,000 project or a $2,000 project, or like?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. I can't say without having a discussion or some sort of design in hand to know what the proposal would be. There are a number of probably more affordable options to achieve compliance, but without having a drawing, I would hesitate to throw a number in the air.
Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. Staff, with the second recommendation, we've provided kind of a 3-month runway for compliance. I'm just curious, we know that there are both labor shortages and supply chain issues. If there's what staff see as a concern about potentially extending that timeline to 6 months or a year?
Through you, Mayor Elliott. Our primary concern is the safety of the house, obviously, or the occupants of the house. The notice on title would certainly protect any prospective purchasers of the property. I mean, generally, we sort of pursue a or a 6 month path with regards to legal action. I have no objection to pushing it to 6 months if that's something that's that council prefers.
Okay, council, if there's no other questions, this is the part where we have to get to the resolutions. So there are two parts to this. The first is to register the section 57, and that portion is really to protect any potential buyers if the home changes hands. The second part provides staff with the flexibility to provide injunctive relief if there is no action taken. And as you heard from staff, there is an opportunity to extend that deadline if council sees fit. Sure, come forward.
The only problem with rebuilding this back up to a crawl space is financial right now for Sharon. We did get an estimate from a contractor. They said anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 to rebuild that space. So at this time, Sharon actually does not have any funds or any credit that she can access to build that space. So that is the only problem we're running into. And that's why she's asking council if she can just keep that as open storage area. Like, she will remove plumbing and wiring so that no one can live there, but the actual building up and filling it is actually quite financially, it's really difficult for her to do in 3 months or 6 months at this time. Coming up with the money is really difficult at this time.
Councillor Pettengill.
Just going the other way a bit and setting aside costs, are there any compliant ways to make this habitable that aligns with our bylaws?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, no, there are not. Flood construction elevation is established through our GIS modeling and through geotechnical study, and the lowest elevation at which habitable space can be created on that particular lot starts on the first floor. So nothing below that can be habitable, with the exception of the foyer entrance and the garage, which is generally not considered habitable, but it can be full height. So there really isn't. And then, like I mentioned before, there is a covenant on title that follows suit with our bylaws to that regard.
All right. Council, there's staff recommendation in front of us. Councillor French.
Yeah, I'll move the staff recommendation, switching 3 months to 6 months as the deadline.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ray seconds. Speak to it, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. And, I was fully prepared to speak quite harshly to this situation tonight. And I appreciate that the owners and the representatives have presented to us tonight. And I think it's quite honorable that they've taken responsibility for the situation such that it is. And there's not a lot of flexibility for us here to grant what they're asking for. So I think that by extending this deadline out to 6 months, at least it gives some additional time to come up with some solution to get this contravention sorted out.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. And I am supporting this. It is an unfortunate set of circumstances, not the least of which is the advice from the mortgage broker. But it is a life safety issue, and it is something that we have to take very seriously. I've heard of other municipalities where they've just filled the space with sand or concrete, which is a bit of a crude way of assuring that it won't be used as living space. I don't want to be prescriptive, but I think there's a variety of different solutions here that can be explored. And so I think 6 months is a fair estimate of time. The motion actually reads, though, at that time, and not before 6 months, the corporate officer has some discretion So if progress is being made, it's not necessary to commence the action right away. So it is a bit of a soft boundary in that sense, but it does require typically that there is progress being made in the discussion. But as sympathetic as I am for the family's difficulties, it is a life safety issue, and that is the thing for me that is most important here. So support this.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Through the chair. I would have liked to see actually a further extension to 9 or 12 months for that compliance piece in this motion. I think that's where I would feel more comfortable. Recognizing that it is a bit of a soft boundary, that it gives the corporate officer some discretion on whether legal action is commencing or not. I do think that there are some smaller actions that could be taken in terms of taking out plumbing and electrical, and we could work with the homeowner to ensure that that space is not being lived in, but give her up to a year to actually get it filled in and find the finances to do that. So that's where I would have preferred to see this motion go. So I won't be supporting it, although I am very supportive of the first clause around introducing the Section 57 on title. I think that's the most critical point in terms of protecting future buyers. But I feel like we could have given a little bit more lenience in the circumstances, given the challenges of the family.
Did you want to attempt an amendment?
That is a great suggestion. So I will move an amendment that in the second clause, the last line reads, should compliance not be achieved within 12 months from May 3rd.
Is there a seconder? It's seconded by Councillor Hereford. Do you want to speak to your amendment more than you've already said?
Nope, not that more than I've already said.
Councillor Hereford? On the amendment.
Thank you. This is a life safety issue, but how we arrived here, I think, are some extraordinary circumstances, and the challenges to rectifying it have been well articulated. So I'd like to, this is also an area where we have some discretion as a council, and I think it's appropriate to exercise that here. So I'm supportive of extending to 12 months.
Other comments on the amendment? Councillor Pettengill?
Yeah, I'll be supporting this as well. I think one of the things that I'm struggling with a bit here is, we do have a housing crisis, but there is a critical life safety issue for new development. This is the expectation. I don't think we want to set a precedent where you could ignore that important change. And yet at the same time, we have people in grandfathered buildings living in different circumstances. So it's trying to find that balance and considering all the circumstances. I think giving a year to find some workable resolutions is maybe an acceptable compromise. It is a tough situation though, and I can definitely appreciate where the homeowner is coming from.
Any other comments on the amendment? I think I will support the amendment. As challenging as it is, the Section 57 is the most important part. What saddens me the most is just the failure all along the way in this homeowner getting bad advice from a lot of different people, whether that was from a mortgage broker, a bank, a contractor. I find that to be just a terrible shame, and putting someone in this predicament. I think the Section 57 is essential given the precarious nature of the finances here, so that this home doesn't get passed on to someone else with this issue. So I think that's very important. I would, however, like to extend our discretion to give this homeowner a little more time to bring that space into compliance with the 4'11" ceiling. And certainly I would hope to see the electrical and plumbing come out as soon as possible. And perhaps finding more financially acceptable ways to fill the space, given that amount of timeline from council. So if there's no further hands on the amendment, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Or sorry, the amendment carries. So on the main motion as amended with the 12-month extension, any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. Okay, Council, we're moving on to item 7A2. This is a development permit number 581 for Works 1 on the Oceanfront. And I will turn over to Mr. Veliniskas to walk us through this DP with variance. So there is an opportunity for the public to speak tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to put up my presentation. Not sure.
Oh, yeah. Who could share? Do you have on my screen? Screen, yeah, on YouTube.
Will I be able to see my notes?
See you?
No,
No.
it's the one on the left. This guy. Maybe you can you do this here? See those little, there's the notes. No, it doesn't do anything.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess to work out our technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Jonas broke it.
Again.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I think we've worked out our technical issue mostly. And so I'll now turn over to staff to present the DP for Works 1 on the Oceanfront.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jonas Veliniskas, Director of Community Planning, and I'm presenting development permit number 581, which is known as Works 1 tonight. This development permit is for a commercial and office use building on the oceanfront, and it does have one variance involved. So the location is sort of towards the southern end of the Oceanfront Peninsula. The property is located right on the main road that leads to the park. You can see the land use designations on this map, and it's essentially in Block B. So this is primarily an employment area with some limited residential permitted in Block B, but not on this parcel. The zoning is CD 69. Block B, and we've got one development permit area that applies, which is development permit area number 12, which applies to all of the oceanfront. And of course, this application, as all applications on the oceanfront, are subject to the phase development agreement, which is a 20-year agreement that guides development on the oceanfront. So here you can see the first phase, which is Works 1, on the eastern portion of the property. On the western portion of the property, which is at the top of the screen here, is phase 2, which is a future project, which is not essentially part of this development permit application. The two projects will share the parking and the underground parkade. But only the first phase is being built at this time. So it is a 4-story fully commercial building. It will have to meet step 3 of our building bylaw, which is the energy step code. Step 3, there is an option for step 2 that the applicants could explore if there's a commitment to limit greenhouse gas intensity to 1. The applicants haven't committed to that yet. They're thinking that they're going to be able to meet step 3 because it's a larger building. It's easier to do that. The building is representing a herring in its color scheme, as well as the siding material, as well as landscaping. And I probably will elaborate on that a little bit more. So here you can see the siding material, I believe is called Rising. The windows have been designed so to minimize bird impact. The building has a generous canopy on all 3 frontages. So the building actually overhangs the sidewalk area. And the sidewalk area, so half of the sidewalk essentially is on the private property. And the district is getting a public access right away. So that it ensures that we have a wide sidewalk and a good portion of it is going to be covered. So it's going to be retail at ground level, I believe around 800 square feet or square meters, and then a considerable amount of office space above that. And I have the stats here I can pull out. So in total, the square footage of this building, the kind of usable areas, not the common areas, is about 5,200 square meters. Most of that is office space at 4,376.8 square meters. This is an excerpt from the landscape design. So the seating and the landscaping planters are also resembling fish or herring, which is part of the theme in this building. There's going to be seating on the main road. So the sort of the bottom of the screen, the frontage, that's the main road that leads to the Spockus Feather Park. And the seating underneath the building will be partially covered by the building's canopy. There is one variance involved, and that is circled in red on the screen here. So it's essentially because the parking is located behind the building, our zoning bylaw requires buffering of the parking areas, and the buffering has specific parameters. So it has to be 2 meters. It has to have shrubs and trees. Now, because the proponents want to maximize the parking areas, which allows for maximization of the employment space, they're asking to reduce those planting areas essentially down to 1 meter from 2 meters and allow for it to be essentially shrubs. So when you go down to 1 meter, you just don't have the room to plant trees in it. Related to that, there will be a parkade underneath those planters. And so that helps with the structural design as well, having less planting and less material over top of it. So it's a fairly minor variance in staff's opinion, and it allows for more employment space. So staff are supportive of the request. There's also an encroachment of the parkade, so they're trying to maximize the underground parking. And because the oceanfront is being filled and the streets are going up above where the ground level is now and where the parkades are going to be, it allows the opportunity for parkades to kind of extend underneath the sidewalk. Our engineering department doesn't have any issue with it because all the services are located in the street. So there's no services going above the parkade. It's just essentially sidewalk and the planters. So it's about a 1.5 meter intrusion, and that's going to have to be subject to an encroachment agreement following the DP approval. The one thing I will note is that the applicants are, so in addition to providing the public access on the private property for sidewalks to go around the building, the applicants are also exceeding the trip end facility requirement. So they're required to do 1 based on the size of that building, and they're doing 2 instead. This has gone to the advisory design panel. Design panel was supportive of the project as presented. There was no public information meeting held for this. Notices were sent to owners and tenants within 100 meters of the variance request. And here we have a motion. So the motion includes 4 conditions. One is registration of a covenant to make sure that the kind of ground floor retail units don't cover up all of their window area, which is something that we see downtown. So we were trying to avoid that. We want to make sure that there's visibility into the building. So the applicants have agreed to register a covenant, public access right away along all sidewalk areas. On private land, we will need to execute an encroachment agreement to allow for that 1.5 meter intrusion of the parkade into one of the streets. And then finally, provision of a snow storage and snow removal plan, which will follow the development permit approval. And here's the variance request. So it's going from 2 meters down to 1 meter and no trees, just shrubs. Thank you.
All right, council, any clarifying questions? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, going back to the encroachment piece, just to clarify, the encroachment is underneath the sidewalk, not onto the sidewalk.
That's correct. So it will be underground parkade that extends a
Yeah,
little
can you go
bit.
and
There
can you
it
just
is.
explain what the color is on that?
Yes. So
Okay.
it's the encroachment, the red line is the property line. And so it's the blue line is the extent of the parkade, which is essentially under the sidewalk.
That is helpful. Thank you. My other question was the staff report reads that an additional statutory right-of-way capturing the need to access and maintain any underground utilities may be required. But we're not securing that here. So I'm just curious when we determine if that is required and when we would secure it.
We would determine that at servicing agreement, essentially, when the utilities are being designed.
Thank you. And then my final question was about the trip end facility. So appreciate that the proponent is providing 2 instead of 1. There were some comments in the ADP notes around ensuring that some of those trip end facilities were accessible and also ensuring or accommodating cargo and adaptive bikes. And I'm wondering if that's been addressed at all by the proponent.
That's an excellent question. I don't have that information with me at the moment. Something I could follow up after the meeting, maybe in an email.
Okay, other questions on the DP? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, just the parking encroachment. You spoke to services. Is that does that get into our right of way at all? And I guess at the end of the day, is there any risk of this impacting sidewalks or bike paths or sort of public space seating and that sort of thing?
Thank you, through Mayor. No, so there is no services that are going in that 1.5 meters. It's just sidewalk essentially. And, the encroachment agreement will cover any requirements that we would have for our maintenance of the sidewalk. So the engineering department is satisfied that, this will not cause issues for maintenance of the sidewalk.
Okay. And if we wanted to put a bike path or something along there in the future, there's no reason why that couldn't be accommodated in theory.
That's correct.
Okay, and then in the DPA guidelines 6.7.2.3.2, support bicycle access and parking. So secure bicycle stores sufficient for all residents, employees, and visitors is encouraged and possibly considered in conjunction with parking standards and requirements. It looks like quite a large employment space, and so we're talking about a total of 21 bike spaces. So I'm just wondering how we square that. I guess to me, I would expect a greater number of bike spaces if it's to secure stores sufficient for all residents, employees, and visitors. And I understand this is just a guideline, but we said it's compliant, I think, and so I'm just trying to understand that where the level is there.
Thank you. That is a good point. It is zoning versus DPA guidelines. So in this case, we have very specific requirements for Class A and Class B bike parking, essentially. So those are the requirements, and it's up to the proponents if they want to exceed that. They think they've got enough bike parking in this building, and I think that's where we have to, if we don't think that would be enough, then we have to look at our zoning bylaw, which of course is frozen for the period of the phase development agreement.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just trying to sort of assess where we are in terms of the guidelines, I guess. And it does say it's not meeting the green roof standard. It talks about with some of the other things, and I didn't note the point, but the roof is solar ready as in terms of one of the energy, sort of clean energy sorts of things. But isn't every roof solar ready? I guess I'm wondering if there's something special in the design here, or.
That's a great question. Through you, Mayor. So my understanding is that the applicants are planning to put the infrastructure in the roof so that the wiring is there to receive solar panels. But that's as far as they're going with the commitment.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing, I was sort of disappointed to see the report that there was no commitment to that I saw about low carbon energy sources. But in the architectural diagrams, it does say use of low carbon energy sources for space and water heating. I'm just wondering if you can speak to what the actual plans are, and I think you said there aren't any commitments, but I'm a bit confused by what I read in the architectural drawings. So I'm just wondering if you can clarify that.
Thank you. So the proponents are planning to use a heat pump for space heating, but they're not sure yet about hot water heating. And normally, if there's a variance, we look for those commitments with residential development. With commercial development and office space, given that it's such a minor variance, we're leaving that up to the applicant essentially to meet our regulations.
Someone put their hand up. Councillor Rice. Took me a second there.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the diagram that's up on the screen. And so the buffer part that we talked about with the variance is underneath the dashed green line. And then there's the property line. And then there's the blue line, which I take it as the limit of the sidewalk or the underground parking garage. And then is that further landscaping before we get to the road?
That's correct. That's essentially the boulevard.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So because there is a variance, we do give the public an opportunity to speak. And so since there's no one at City Hall, I still have to read this. So bear with me. The proponents and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard electronically, via telephone, or from a computer with respect to the proposed variances to District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011. There is one proposed variance to the zoning bylaw, and the proposed variance is outlined in the staff report. So we would vary section 41.11B sub 1 from a continuous landscape strip not less than 2 meter wide to be screened by a continuous landscape strip not less than 1 meter wide, densely planted with shrubs rather than shrubs and trees. All speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. There are two opportunities. All speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. There are two ways for participants to participate either electronically or in person. I will first call on people participating in person, which there are none. And for speakers online, you can raise your hand by dialing *3 on the telephone, or if you're on WebEx, you open the participant panel and click on the hand icon. When it's your turn to speak online, you will receive a voice prompt via telephone or a dialog box on WebEx. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. Please note that speakers have a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. If you experience any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in WebEx to send the host a message or email hearing@squamish.ca. So I will look to our moderator to see if there's anyone online with their hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. There's nobody online.
So we'll give it a second, *3 on the telephone or the hand icon in the participant panel on WebEx. Council, any final questions? No hands up from the public. All right. So Council, the staff recommendation is before you for Works 1 on the Oceanfront. That includes all the subjects and then the variance. You're moving that, Councilor Race. That is seconded by Councilor French. Comments, Councilor Race.
Thank you. And I am happy to support this after many years and many fights and many battles. We finally got the vision. We're starting to see the vision, which is employment lands. And here we have an example of what that can be. I have no issue with the variances. I have no issue with the other aspects of this development. Although I must say I have to differ with the planning department. I didn't see the resemblance to a herring. I don't know what I can say about that, but I'll take the planning department's word for it. I think it was in the form of siding, and I guess it's kind of scaled looking. When I was looking at this, when I was reading it this weekend, I said we can be grateful, I guess, that they didn't bring one along that looked like a bunny or something like that. But we'll wait and see what the next one looks like. But anyway, it is an attractive building. I think it will certainly be a great addition to the oceanfront, and as I say, part of the original vision that that we're still proceeding on. And so happy to support this.
I've got Councilor Anderson, then Councilor French, then Councilor Stoner.
Thank you. I will also be supporting the staff recommendation. I have no concerns with the variances proposed. I'm particularly happy to see as a design element the generous canopy that Mr. Veliniskas has proposed. That's an attractive aspect of this building design. The building incorporates mass timber construction and height bonuses offered is something we've discussed recently in zoning bylaw revisions. The height bonus does not come into play here. I'm looking at the sustainability narrative, and it ticks off several boxes which should be of interest to us. Just this morning, I brought to the attention of a couple of visiting UBC professors in forestry and wood science this building proposal. And they consider it, from what they understood, to be a reference building for beyond Squamish. There are not all that many buildings of this type. But I have two issues with the design narrative I pass on as comments. They're not any kind of showstoppers whatsoever. There is a reference to smaller dimension material 2x is used to achieve large spans, and I don't understand that. That must be referring to glulam beams to achieve this span are comprised of 2-inch lamella, because I don't think we're going to have 2-inch stock spanning long spans. So these are important things for our conversation and building awareness of this construction method. More importantly, I find that the structural system of the building is not clearly identified. There's reference to exposed steel posts and also to mass timber columns and beams. So I would prefer to see a building like this, an innovative building, clearly identified as to what the structural system is and label it. Is it a hybrid steel mass timber building? That's important because these types of construction methods are receiving extensive discussion, also not least in research and development community. But it's also not only a question for engineers, but for our interest and for the general public because of the novelty and significance of this type of construction within our community's green building goals and dialogue. So in summary, I don't see those issues spelled out all that clearly. And in particular, what is the type of this building? Is it a hybrid structure? Is it a mass timber structural system? I would prefer to see that spelled out explicitly. Otherwise, fine effort and happy to move support the recommendation.
Maybe that was in your missing notes, Mr. Veliniskas, too.
It was. I'm really sorry. That is a really key point. It is a mass timber building, but they are also using the building essentially needs some steel components to its structure.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. This is an exciting development permit to approve. The new Spuckawest Feather Park is taking shape, so it's appropriate that some buildings are soon going to follow. This particular building represents what I think is a bright future at what used to be a chemical plant. It's taken us as a community significant effort to get to where we are now, from site remediation to planning processes that started, stopped, restarted, and political maneuvering in between that held up development of the area. So I'm happy to support issuing this DP and to push forward construction of the oceanfront lines.
Just going along the horseshoe now.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will be supporting the DP with its one variance. I think it's very exciting to see a full 4-story employment space building being proposed here. I have no concerns with the variance to reduce the planting size. I think that that is reasonable, as well as the under the sidewalk encroachment. When I first read the report, I thought it was encroachment onto the sidewalk, which I was not excited about. But if it's under the sidewalk, I think that makes good sense. I, like my fellow councillor Pettingill, I was a little bit surprised by the low number of parking stalls or bike parking stalls. I would have expected them to be higher given the amount of employment space that's being provided, but it is meeting the zoning bylaw and the requirements there. So I'm not going to hold up this DP, but it is giving me some food for thought in terms of updating, not a full zoning update, bylaw update, but how we actually address that and ensuring that trip end facilities allow for accessibility and how we address cargo bikes and adaptive bikes. So that's another conversation for another day, but happy to support this TP. Thank you.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. I will be supporting this. I have a little bit of reluctance. I agree the variances in and of themselves aren't a huge concern. I do want to be a little bit careful that I keep hearing over and over from people with some of the other engagements we're doing, the importance of green space, green areas, and seeing that green. And so I think in this case, it's an acceptable trade-off, but I think we do have to be very careful when we're allowing people to cut greenery, visible greenery in the public spaces. I do think this is falling short on bike parking and end of trip facilities and a couple other things in the guidelines where I would disagree maybe with some of the staff assessment. I don't think the guidelines have been met, but probably not far enough to reject this. And, where I struggle, the variances are minor, so maybe we don't have enough leverage to require a stronger response to the climate emergency. But we've seen now a few developments with larger commercial, office, and residential buildings committing to no gas covenants, and I think going a lot further in terms of sustainability. And so it pains me a little bit not to push further on that or not to have the tools to push further. But I also recognize there are more buildings and DPs and other projects coming forward with this developer on the site. I would love to see the developer be a bit proactive here and take a no gas approach, make some no gas commitments, even if we don't impose it here today. From my perspective, that would shine a really positive light on some of that future work. I may or may not be on council when those other things come forward, but food for thought maybe. The final thing, and it's more of a note to staff, reading the staff synopsis of alignment with our strategic plan and coming back to, I think this development is a bit weak in terms of some of the climate response. And it does talk to the mass timber construction as, in terms of our sustainability climate focus, but it doesn't identify some of what I see as gaps in terms of where other things are. And so in those reports, I would sort of appreciate seeing where these projects are hitting the mark, but also where they're falling short. But with that said, all things considered, I will support this as presented. Thank you.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. The 4 subjects are very reasonable and make sense to me. I quite like seeing the encroachment under the sidewalk, and with ongoing development in these lands, this will be an interesting opportunity going forward to see how many of those how many of the future developments actually take advantage of that. And it hasn't been an option that's available on very many properties in Squamish, given our flood control levels. So I think that's quite exciting and creative. The one variance I think is reasonable, and I'm in support of that. I think that going forward, there's that accumulative effect of varying this particular one many times may not be appropriate. So going forward, I'll need to keep an eye on that to make sure we're not sort of further eroding the required green space overall. But I think there's a lot to like here. I will also mention that the bike parking, as we go around town, I'm actually seeing, especially as the weather gets better, I am seeing full bike racks in a lot of places, and some of those are new developments that most likely met our zoning bylaws. So I think we're having successes there, but I think there's room for improvement, and so I would encourage, in general, an increase wherever possible, and perhaps that's something the developer will take away and react to as a way to get customers to the retail spaces, and hopefully won't have to wait until the racks are overflowing from the employment spaces as well, and can be proactive in that regard. But I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herford. It's been really exciting to see the buildings come forward from Carbon Engineering and then the Sales Center and now Works One. And they're all, I think, beautiful in their own right. But I was really pleased with the just the whole concept that came forward with this building. I think it's beautiful. The variance is supportable because of the other attention to detail around the public realm. I don't think any of our neighborhoods should necessarily look the same. And I just think the Oceanfront is shaping up to look like nothing else that we have in Squamish, which is really exciting. I think, hopefully it's not just staff making notes themselves, but council too, about those places where we want to make changes in the future to zoning bylaws. But also in this case, we don't have that many opportunities to open up the phase development agreement and the zoning. So looking at those opportunities when they come up to make any slight changes that we need to. But I think this building is absolutely on the right track. I think will be a very compelling place to attract people to work and will contribute to a beautiful public realm space down in that area. So happy to support this DP. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, just a quick question for staff. When is my understanding is that there's not a proposed zoning bylaw update at this time. Is staff still maintaining a list of items for future zoning bylaw updates? I just don't want to put a motion forward that would redirect staff.
Yes, correct. We are always, the zoning bylaw is kind of like it's going through revolving updates. So the next one we're planning on, I think would be starting maybe at the end of this year. But we've got a plan for, I think it's accessibility and there's other things.
I may just put a motion forward then that staff add a review of the bike parking requirements for office space and accommodation for cargo and adaptive bikes to the list of items for consideration of the next zoning bylaw update.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Councillor Pangill?
Yeah, I will support this. I would also like to add a few other things, especially climate focused and commercial and industrial buildings. But I think maybe this is a longer discussion for a committee of the whole. So I will support this as is for now. But maybe if we could have sometime between now and when we start this committee of the whole about what sorts of changes we're hoping to see in the next rewrite.
Councillor Pettengill, the next committee of the whole includes an update on our community climate action plan, and that might be a great place for you to ask those questions. I will call the question on this motion. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you, Mr. Valniskis. We're on to item 8A. This is under bylaws. So council, this is one of the amended documents that you received at the table tonight. And Ms. Pollock has highlighted those items. She's also going to speak to them in her presentation. So this is the amendment bylaw for Squamish election and assent voting, number 2890, 2022. And Ms. Pollock, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Charlene Pollock. I'm the Manager of Legislative Services, and I'm here tonight to speak to the election and assent voting bylaw amendments in front of you. So prior to each local government election, the Chief Election Officer and myself review the election and assent voting bylaw to ensure that the bylaw reflects current practice and aligns with the legislation. I had handed out an amendment to the bylaw on blue paper, as Mayor Elliott mentioned. So I'll just walk through the changes in the bylaw. So on the first page, where it says section 110.7, that was a correction. It had the wrong section there. And then page 4. No, nothing on page 2. Page 4 on section I, just added in the wording, in the presence of at least one election official and any candidate representatives present, added in the unopened accepted certification envelopes and previously processed. So that will, just the title. The purpose of that wording is just to allow for any mail ballots that come in during general voting day. So we wouldn't have opened the certification envelopes at that point. And then on F on that page, section 10.6, just added in the words, so after if, in order to determine results, just for clarity. So those are the amendments, or just that were added since the report went out. So I'll just briefly walk through the main amendments in the bylaws. So they are outlined in the report. So as amendment to section 9.1, mail ballot voting. And that is to align with changes in the Local Government Act and the legislation. So mail ballot voting is now open to all electors in the District of Squamish. So that has the previous wording has been taken out. Amendments to section 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, and 9.5 all relate to mail ballot voting. And mostly to procedures around mail ballot voting. So the purpose is to align mail ballot procedures with best practices and with current practices. We expect to receive a much higher number of mail ballots this election than last, and it's important that the procedures are outlined clearly and accurately in the bylaw. We've been told to expect anywhere from up to 10% with mail ballot votes, so we'll see what happens with that. And then section 10.6, the recount procedure. So there is a difference between a judicial recount, which is required in the legislation in the event of a tie vote, and an unofficial recount if votes are close and there is a request from a candidate. It is best practice for the decision to be with the Chief Election Officer as part of her duty to determine results pursuant to the Act. And then one further amendment was added to the bylaw after the report to council was drafted, and that is to section 7.1. It's a very small change. We just added the words up to in front of 3 special voting opportunities. And that's just to provide more flexibility to the Chief Election Officer. So the Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officers, so there's 2, myself and Melissa Von Bludow, follow best practices as outlined in the BC Local Government Elections Manual. I think Robin's got the manual there. It's a pretty large, inclusive manual. The manual is a result of a collaborative effort of the Local Government Management Association Advisory Committee, Elections BC, and a number of other participants. There's a lot of work that has gone into that. As well, we recently attended the election training that was conducted jointly by the LGMA Advisory Committee, Elections BC, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So next steps include adoption following first 3 readings of the bylaw and posting on the website. And we're now less than 6 months from the elections. Staff are busy with preparations, and there is information up on the website with respect to the upcoming election, and we will be continually updating that information as we have information. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Council, do you have questions on this bylaw amendment? Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. So after reviewing the report to council and a few other resources, I'm not clear on how the chief election officer ensures that someone who votes by mail-in ballot doesn't vote a second time at either an advanced voting opportunity or on the main election day. So what's the process to ensure that there's a record of the mail-in vote being received so that if a voter tries to vote again, whether that's by design or dementia, that it simply can't happen, it gets flagged somehow?
Through the chair, that's a really good question. So in the last election, we kept a list, and then when someone voted by mail, then we went and stamped that on all of the paper voting books. But this year we're using Voter View, which is an electronic program for our voting list. And so we're going to be using software for mail ballots. And so that's going to integrate together. So apparently it's very good software. So it will all integrate. So if someone fills out an application, that will be reflected in the Voter View software. So there should be no ability for someone to vote twice.
Councillor Stoner.
Just to follow up on Councillor French's question, if you request a mail ballot, though, you decide not to vote by mail, you can still show up at an in-person voting.
You would have to bring us that other ballot back. You can't cast, there can't be any opportunity to cast 2 ballots.
And then my other question was just going to be around the timing of when somebody would expect to receive a mail ballot and getting it back. So usually somebody is requesting it because they aren't going to be in town. So how long do we give folks between receiving a mail-in ballot and then a turnaround time to get it back to you folks before close of general election?
Through the chair, it is a pretty tight turnaround. So we can't be giving out mail ballots until the day after we receive the ballots. So it is very tight. There's not a lot of time, and we let people know when they apply. So, they would have to, we would pay for mailing, but if electors wanted a package couriered, they would have to pay for that. And if it's any distance across the country or another country, it would have to be couriered in order to make it back.
Do we, if we're anticipating up to 10% of the electors to mail in their ballots, does that change? This whole bylaw refers to the chief election officer, but can you get other people to open those on election day? Like, we're going to have to staff up or else we'll be counting well into the night.
Well, rest assured, we will be well staffed up. But yes, it will be between Shar and myself, Melissa, and we can assign other people who are voting clerks and voting staff to come and help and assist with feeding the mail ballots through 100%. Yeah.
My other question is, I thought they changed the rules on how long you needed to be a resident in a community before you can vote. And did we needed to update this bylaw at all to reflect those changes?
That's right. The requirement is that you are a resident, but it doesn't say a number of days. It did say 30 days, and I don't think that is in the bylaw anywhere.
No, that's not never been in the bylaw. It's been in our other materials and our educational materials and our things that we put on the website and registration information, but not in the bylaw.
So that is, so if I move to town the day before the election and I come in to vote, there's a system for that on the day.
We have same day registration for new residents, as long as they have proof of residency, some identification. We can, if they don't have a hydro bill or something like that, that shows what their residency is, we have a form. There's a form for that.
There's a form for everything, I
That's right.
think. And does that apply to someone who's a new resident who then wants to have a mail-in ballot? Is there a scenario under which I've just moved here, but I'm going to be away for general election, and can I get a mail-in ballot? Do you have a form for that?
It's the same form, the residency form. If they're already here, they can't get a ballot before they move here, but a mail ballot. But if they can show us that they live here. And the other thing is, for mail ballots, they don't have to be away anymore. You can get a mail ballot for any reason.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions? All right, so the recommended motion is that the Squamish election assent voting bylaw number, amendment bylaw number 2890, 2022 be given first three readings. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Race. Any further comments? Councillor Stoner?
Just a quick thanks to staff for your work on this and making sure that we're all up and compliant in advance of our election. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments, call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Next up, one of our favorite topics, right, Mr. Buxton? Our development cost charges bylaw number 2911, 2022.
So, yeah, and I think consultant from Urban Systems should be online with the presentation.
I see Mr. Merrill and Ms. Waite.
Hi, Mr. Buxton, I'm here.
But Jen's got.
So we're just giving Ms. Waite the ability to share her screen, I think. Are staff going to say anything first, or are we just turning this over?
I can provide a brief introduction. I mean, it's been a while since council saw this. I think it was in early December, at which point council gave us some direction to take this bylaw out for public engagement, which was delayed for a number of reasons. But I say now we are ready to bring this back for consideration and then move it on to the inspector. So I can turn it over to Ms. Waite now.
Ms. Waite, maybe you can introduce yourself and your colleague.
Yes, good evening, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Jen Waite. I'm a community consultant with Urban Systems. I'm here to present the DCC update. My colleague is John Dumbrell. He is also in attendance and here to help facilitate any questions. Urban Systems has been working with staff since the fall to assist and update to the district's development cost charge program. And before beginning, I would like to politely ask that any questions you may have be held into the end, at which point we will have time to address. So the purpose of today's meeting is to confirm the proposed DCC rates, which have been previously shown to council members prior to stakeholder engagement. and complete the 3 readings of the proposed DCC bylaw. So on the agenda today is a brief project background, a DCC's overview, DCC program development, current and proposed DCC rates, the DCC rate comparison to other municipalities and stakeholder engagement, other considerations, next steps. So project background. So the district's current DCC program was updated and reviewed in 2020. The district's current program is based on a complex Excel financial model. Staff were looking to simplify the model to help with future updates and facilitation of the DCCs. Urban Systems has been hired to undertake an update to the current DCC program. This is a major update as the program list is being fully updated. So a DCC's overview. What are DCCs? Also known as development cost charges. They are fees which help communities recover the costs of offsite infrastructure needed to support growth. Offsite infrastructure includes servicing related infrastructure such as water, sewage, roads, and drainage, as well as parks. The power to establish DCCs is under the Local Government Act, and the DCC programs are developed to conform to the best practices guide. This is the tool the ministry utilizes when evaluating the DCCs. The best practice is to review the DCC program, projects and costs on a regular basis with a minor update every 1 to 3 years, primarily looking at minor cost updates, with a major update occurring every 3 to 5 years to consider further updates to the program list and have the DCC bylaw more in line with relevant information. So Squamish is currently completing a major update. DCCs work off the benefit or pay principle. Whoever's deemed to receive the most benefit through the establishment of the infrastructure will pay a greater portion of the cost. So in these cases, it would be an example of this would be greenfield development, where infrastructure is being put in for the sole benefit of the development. That will primarily be paid by the developer. For service upgrades to infrastructure where the benefit will also be felt by taxpayers, the portion of the payment will be spread out between the developer and the municipality to better reflect the benefit of this upgrade or additional servicing infrastructure. So the DCC principles, there are 6 of them as outlined by the best practices guide. So they foster fairness. So growth pays for growth. This ensures that there is an undue burden on existing residents, municipality when growth is occurring, and that the benefits of growth-related upgrades are evenly distributed. They also ensure consistency. The amount expected and the requirements of the infrastructure are laid out and applied consistently when development occurs. They minimize financial risk to the district and ensures that the district is more financially sustainable through the distribution of development costs. They also ensure certainty for the development community as it relates to infrastructure upgrade costs and anticipated costs during the development process. They promote transparency by laying out the expected costs and anticipated infrastructure, and the public can be assured of the municipal decisions. And policy 6, they ensure timely processing of development applications by allowing the district to save for growth-related infrastructure costs. So who pays for DCCs? Applicants for subdivision approval to create single-family development sites, and applicants for building permits to construct multifamily, commercial, industrial, and institutional development. So DCCs are collected at 2 different points in the development process. It's important to note that, especially in the consideration of single family, they are only collected once in the process, and that's dependent on which permit is received first. So at subdivision, residential single family development type will be charged on a per lot or per unit basis. And then at the building permit time, residential single family low density. So those residential single families that are not subject to a subdivision will pay on a per lot or dwelling unit basis. Residential medium density, so in this case townhouses, will pay on a per unit dwelling unit basis. Residential high density apartment will pay on a per unit dwelling unit basis, and then commercial, institutional, industrial all pay on a per square meter of gross floor area. So DCC program development. So this is the general visual layout of the DCC process that Urban Systems guided district staff through. So the beginning of the project, we have to determine projects and capital costs. So in this instance, staff collaborated with Urban to determine an appropriate project list and costs informed through various master plans and the capital plan. The project lists are combined into infrastructure groups being transportation, water, drainage, sanitary sewer, and parks. And costs were also updated for projects already included in the program and were intended to carry over. We then determine the benefit factors. Projects are evaluated on a case-by-case basis on the benefit factor, evaluating again who would benefit most from the development of the project. So growth-driven versus upgrades to address growth. We then estimated growth over a 20-year period and reviewed residential and non-residential development types for growth. We moved on to determine equivalent units. So this considers the allocation of costs based on impact of infrastructure for each development type. And then we determined the draft assist factor. The LGA requires municipalities to determine an assist factor of between 1 to 5%. And this is done in demonstration that the municipality supports the development. This all was combined to calculate the DCC rates, which were presented with the draft rates are presented to council and then were brought to stakeholder consultation. And now we are at the 3 readings of the DCC bylaw following the stakeholder consultation. Once the 3 readings are approved by council, we'll move on to approval by the province. Once submitted to the ministry, the review has typically been taking 10 to 12 weeks. Following that approval, the bylaw will then be submitted for full adoption. So points of consideration when undertaking the DCC update. The benefit factor range chosen was between 43%, which represents the shared responsibility and benefit between existing and new growth, and 100%, which represents full benefit to new growth. The growth horizon of 20 years was chosen to align with other district documents, and the municipal assist factor of 1% was chosen. Again, this is a minimum amount, and it shows that the municipality has support for development and is required through the Local Government Act. An important note that the unit collection for multifamily use development was changed from a per meter squared gross floor area basis to a per unit basis. This was done to make it easier to track the amount of DCCs collected for multifamily developments, as it better represents the number of units built when receiving the building permit. So it may help incentivize a greater variety of multifamily unit types, so more 2 and 3 bedrooms, and it may be more equitable as relative to other land uses, as multifamily units tend to have similar impacts on infrastructure regardless of their size. And larger units are charged higher in DCCs on a per square meter gross floor area basis, and they may not necessarily have the significantly higher impacts that would allude to. So the current and proposed program. So the proposed DCC rates for 2022 are listed below. For residential single family low density on a per lot basis, the proposed combined DCC rates is 21,616, whereas the existing rates from 2020 are 18,854. For residential single family small lot, again charged on a per lot basis, the proposed DCC rates was 16,603, whereas the existing DCC rates is 15,922. Residential medium density townhouse was done on a per unit basis. The proposed DCC rates are 10,747, and the existing rates were 10,618. residential high density apartment, again, updated to be charged on a per unit basis, was $7,677. The existing DCC rates was converted to represent that per unit basis, and the total came out to $7,120. For commercial on a per square meter gross floor area basis, the proposed DCC rates is $117.64, whereas the existing rates was $111.57. For institutional, it was the proposed DCC rates were $99.89, and the existing rates are $90.10. And then finally, industrial, the proposed DCC rate is $78.88, whereas the existing DCC rates are $79.86. So the total cost of the proposed DCC program broken down by the infrastructure type. So this demonstrates the full DCC recoverable, which is the total amount of the project in the program. The total municipality column represents, the total municipal responsibility column represents the cost that the municipality is undertaking based on the benefit factors and the municipal assist. The total DCC program cost is the full cost of the program. Apologies, I misspoke, with the DCC recoverable being the cost to developers. So that will be the funds that will be paid out by developers over the 20-year time horizon. So overall, the cost to developers, they cover 78% of the program, whereas the cost of the municipality is 22% of the program. So the DCC rate comparisons we have today, and which were also included in the staff report, provide enforce both the enforced DCC rates from the District of Squamish and the proposed rates with comparable municipalities and their enforced DCC rates. It's important to note that the DCC program that we are currently reviewing is a major update, which means this is the full program update. Typically, there are greater changes in rates when undertaking a full update. So this is the demonstration. This is the chart that shows the single family rate comparison. One aspect I do want to highlight here for you all is that the orange bar in some of the municipalities is actually the regional charges. So for those municipalities within a regional district that share services, regional charge is typically implemented, and this will cause the DCCs to be greater overall. And the district does not have any regional rates. So you can see the proposed 2022 falls at 21,670, just behind Pitt Meadows, Chilliwack, and Port Moody. So again, with the apartment DCC rate comparison, you can see that the Squamish proposed falls at 7,700, just slightly above what is currently in force, and below about quite a few other municipalities. The commercial DCC rate comparison, again, the proposed is at 117.65. Whereas the current is 111.57. For this update, the equivalency factors were examined to better reflect the weight of the program and costs, which is informed through engineering inputs, which could result in this increase as well. Due to the type of land use, commercial as well as industrial are largely comprised and weighted on roads projects, as that tends to be the greater service that is impacted by these uses. For the industrial rate comparison, again, the current one is at current in force rate is at 79.86, and the Squamish proposed is at 78.88. Stakeholder and community engagement. So the best practices guide recommends consulting with key stakeholders in the development industry as part of the DCC update. This is not mandated by the Local Government Act, rather it is just a best practice. So engagement summary. The key stakeholders engaged were included the Development Liaison Committee, where a meeting was held on February 17th, 2022, and the Chamber of Commerce, which the meeting was held on March 9th, 2022. The comments received from both engagements showed general support for the modest change in the DCC rates, and appreciation of clarity added through the update was also expressed. Other considerations. So as part of the adoption of the bylaw, one component to keep in mind is that in-stream protection will be enforced. So the DCC rates will be effective at bylaw adoption unless the effective date was set for a later date. In this case, that option was not chosen. Legislation provides 1 year in-stream protection for new DCC rates beginning from the date of adoption of the new DCC bylaw. So this in-stream protection only applies for applications that are actively in the development process. The phase-in of DCC rates is another consideration that can be made. The current adopted program is being phased in over a 3-year period, finishing in September 2022. Given that the 1 year in-stream protection is required once the bylaw is updated, it is recommended that the new or proposed DCC bylaw is not phased in. And based on the comparison and increases between the existing DCC rates and the proposed, we feel that it is a marginal raise in the DCC rates, and it's totally appropriate not to require a phase-in. Typically, rates are not phased in unless there is a significant increase in rates. Phasing happens through the municipal assist factor. So if that option was chosen, the district would have to fund the extra cost of that phasing, and would have to evaluate if that choice can be made that in such a way that would be financially sustainable. So next steps. The DCC rates are changing between -1% and 15%. The DCC increases are lower or comparable in changes to housing and land costs since the previous updates. Stakeholder engagement supported the modest increase in DCC rates. When factoring in other comparable community municipalities, Squamish proposed development fees are generally in the middle or low end of comparable residential rates and at the higher end for non-residential rates. Transportation represents the greatest proportion of the total DCC program value. So the next steps, the bylaw is given 3 readings pending approval from council, submission to the ministry for review and endorsement, and then the bylaw is prepared for adoption and 4th reading following approval from the ministry. So myself and John are available for any questions that you may have, and thank you for your time. We also just want to extend our gratitude to staff for being such great collaborators on this project. The turnaround was great, and the focus on getting those project lists sorted between all the departments was an easy and excellent experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waite. Councillor Race.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Under the heading of project information, which in my agenda is page 101 of 217, but it's sort of page 2 of the report. Looking at the first one, time horizon, the table it's there, time horizon is 20 years, but the heading is proposed DCC update. I can understand it's like the OCP, these things have a 20-year time horizon, but the best practice update seems to be every couple of years. Could you clarify that, please?
Through the chair, yep, that's not a problem. So the 20-year horizon is basically to help guide the program development and distribute the costs throughout that time. Typically, we recommend the best practice updates shorter than that time horizon because most further information becomes available to the district. So the updates of capital plans and updates to the OCP. So that's just to keep in line and put a check in to make sure that those DCC rates are reflective of the understanding of the district as it currently stands. Apologies, I can't seem to hear you. I'm not certain if that is only cut out on my end.
Sorry, no, that was my fault. Forgot to turn my mic on. So a little farther down on the same table, under financing, it says no identified DCC projects include financing. Does that mean that the district is not able to finance or should not finance its share of a DCC project?
Through the chair, I think I'll defer to my colleague John Dumbrell for this one. It's a bit of a more nuanced answer here.
Great, thanks very much, Jen. And yeah, and through the chair on that, generally speaking, development cost charges, we're not allowed to include financing. We just include the capital costs of the project. In a situation where a local government is looking forward and needing to finance a project, we have to go to the ministry for special approval for that. And in our conversations with staff, we understand that that's not the case for the list of projects that are coming forward. And so therefore, sufficient funds that are collected through development cost charges will be available to expend on those projects, and financing won't be required.
And then the final question is, on the next page, it's table 2, the DCC rate comparison. And for medium density residential, which is townhouse, it's based on per dwelling unit. And I'm thinking, and I may be wrong in this, but my recollection is that our duplexes are allowed to have suites. Am I correct in that, Mr. Buxton?
In certain zones, yes.
So if we had a duplex that was being built with a suite, would it pay 1 or 2 portions of DCC?
Through the chair. So to answer your question, the dwelling unit, since it's paid on per dwelling unit, it would be paid just for the dwelling. Considerations related to secondary suites are considered through the equivalency factors when developing the DCC rates. So in that case, we take into account a greater population impact. So for example, the typical single family has 2.5 residents. We'd increase that to 3 or 3.5, just to consider, just as a hypothetical for you, to address and consider that additional impact on the infrastructure, rather than requiring another DCC be collected.
Councillor Pettengill, and then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. A couple things. One, in the presentation, I think I heard you mention something to the effect that in a larger DCC update, you might see larger shifts in rates. But the way you phrased it, I wasn't clear if you were saying, that's what's happening here, or that ongoing or soon we are going to have another DCC update with larger impacts. So is this the big one, or the big one is coming?
Through the chair. So thankfully, the district is really on top of your master plans. This is the big one for the district at this junction, just because it is a 5-year update. And a lot of those plans which consider the projects have been recently updated or are soon to be recently updated. So staff had a good sense of what is fully required. Typically, when we think about minor updates, those would be more inflationary increases on a year-by-year basis. So those would be even more marginally increased. And since the previous update had phased in those costs, that kind of accounts for the less of an increase that is showing. So this is considered a major increase, as it is a full overhaul of the program.
Okay, thank you. And without wanting to drive too far into the actual model, I guess when I look at the rates, and I support the beneficiary pay or user pay approach, but I guess intuitively, if we take an arbitrary 100-meter stretch of road and sewer and so on and so forth, so it takes geography out of the equation, you could put a handful of large lot single family there, or on that same piece of road and so on, you could put maybe my math is wrong, in my mind, 8 to 10 times the number of units if it's dense apartment. And so in the rates, I would expect sort of a factor of 8 to 10 in the differential in DCC rates. Now I understand we're not necessarily building out at those two extremes most of the time, but on the flip side, when we tend to build the more single family, larger lot, that tends to be where there's more sprawl further away. You would anticipate higher costs on average, whereas the more dense is closer to existing infrastructure. So I guess, when I look at our rates, there's about a factor of 3 between the apartments and the larger lot single family, where I would expect something more in the line of 6 maybe or something. So I'm just wondering, like, is there something you can point me to where my assumptions are just kind of off, or I'm not thinking about this correctly?
Through the chair, I think John has a good answer for you.
You should know that Councillor Pettengill is our king of hypotheticals. So, John, I'll let you tackle this one.
Thank you, through the mayor. So as Jen mentioned earlier, when we think about development cost charges, they're for the major infrastructure within the district. So here we would think of major, like a collector or an arterial road, a major water system component. And so the situation that you're describing is a really important one, but those costs of the cost of essentially the frontage of building the road, of the small water distribution system, the small sewer collection system, those are recovered at the time of subdivision and through the people that are developing on either side. In contrast to that, development cost charges are really for the major offsite infrastructure components that are that all the traffic generated from the smaller subdivisions that's going onto the roads, that collectively people that are requiring water supplies or sanitary sewer treatment and disposal, drainage facilities, using the district-wide parks, those kinds of things. That's when we think about development cost charges, it's more that sort of infrastructure. And so to shorten up this long explanation, that it's a great situation that you're describing, those costs would be recovered at the time of subdivision through those people that are fronting it, and they would each contribute to this larger pot along with all other development in the community to the major offsite infrastructure components.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I didn't understand that. And so, yeah, that helps this make a lot more sense. I appreciate that. I guess the final thing, it was mentioned that our residential rates are much lower, or are lower on the lower side, and our commercial and other rates are on the higher side compared to other communities. I understand DCCs, though, are meant to charge for your actual consumption. So if I'm correct, then this isn't a situation of us trying to tip the scales one way or another. We just, for whatever reason, have more or more expensive commercial, industrial supporting infrastructure versus infrastructure needed to support residences, just for whatever reason. Is that correct?
Through the chair, with the district circumstances, you do the more sprawled out nature and the road network would contribute the most to that increase in costs for commercial and industrial. So that is a part of the consideration. And through this update, we managed to reevaluate those equivalency factors that speak to the impact of that infrastructure, of those uses on the infrastructure, which primarily is on roads for those commercial and industrial uses. So that's kind of where you see that sort of increase. And John, would you have anything to add there?
No, thank you, Jen. The situation facing the district is quite common, where the roads program is a large component of the development cost charge program, and industrial, commercial, institutional are the generators of traffic that are put onto those arterial and commercial roads. And so between them being the generators of the traffic and roads being a substantial part of the development cost charge program, those two things together generally lead to what we're seeing here with the district, which are higher commercial, industrial, and institutional rates. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I believe the last time, or the second to last time, we had a presentation on the DCC bylaw, we were copied with a project list. We don't have that in the present package. My question is, I take it that the project list is not attached as a schedule to the bylaw. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is typically not what we recommend proceeding with. Otherwise, it proves a bit of an issue when updating those bylaws and the project list. So it is submitted to the ministry for review, but we recommend not including it as part of the bylaw.
Very good. Was a project list shared with the attendees of the two meetings mentioned with your Development Liaison Committee or ours and the Chamber of Commerce? The reason why I ask is that sometimes that can be part of the educational process, if you like, to raise awareness of what's going on with the bylaw review, but also because sometimes the project lists have raised some eyebrows and generated some good discussion. Is that the case, that the project list was discussed with those two engagement groups?
Through the chair, it was my understanding that those project lists were shared with the development groups. Mr. Buxton was in attendance at those meetings, so I think he can provide confirmation on that regard.
Through the chair, the answer is yes. They were shared at both meetings.
Thank you. In the present report, my second topic refers to under units of charge for industrial, commercial, and institutional per square meter of gross floor area is the unit of charge. Now, there is an alternative, and if I'm not mistaken, it's per hectare. Are there some trends as to selecting that unit of charge for that sector, that is?
Go ahead, Mr. Dumbrell.
Thank you. Through the mayor. Yes, there are communities that tend to have much heavy industry with a lot of outdoor storage area. Those would be the communities where there tends to be charge per hectare of industrial area. But what we're seeing a trend toward is not as intensive those kinds of heavy industries, but rather more sort of light industrial, service commercial, relatively large building footprints on the industrial land that's designated in the community plan and zoning bylaw. And so where that's the case, higher coverage, we're definitely seeing a trend toward the charging of development cost charges on the gross floor area, because it better emulates the generation of traffic, the use of water, the generation of wastewater, when we're considering, again, those relatively large building footprints on the industrial land.
Thank you. And that clarifies my follow-up question is just to confirm that there are, in fact, implications for medium industrial land use relative to light industrial land use due to the greater lot coverage. I can assume also that this is something we can review each time, every 2 years or however much we review it, because those plans might change as to expected development. I did have one final question, Mayor Elliott. We have in recent months discussed infrastructure costs for which we cannot use the DCC bylaw. And if I'm not mistaken, it was aspects of fire protection for mid-rise and multi-story buildings, if I'm not mistaken. Are you aware of active discussions on the part of the province to address some of these things that come up for how DCCs can be applied that we might be useful for us in our advocacy, for example?
Through the mayor, if I may. Absolutely. There's things like fire protection, recreation centers, public art are all examples of amenities and other fundamental infrastructure in the community that are definitely required through the new growth and development, which development cost charges are focused on for the kinds of services that we've seen: transportation, water, and sewer. So in the absence of that, what some communities have chosen to go to is something called a community amenity contribution, which are a bit of a, essentially as part of the rezoning process, when there's an upzoning of property, the conversation between the developer of the property and the municipality can result in some of these community amenity contributions. So that's the tool that's being used to address situations like you're describing, but there does continue to be advocacy to the province to reconsider and potentially open up development cost charges and look at their applicability to some of those other situations, again, which are now being covered through community amenity contributions.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Thank you through the chair. Just a quick question. Appreciate the presentation. The DCC program as a whole, you mentioned kind of has a cost recovery breakdown of 78% from the developers and 22% from the municipality. And I'm just curious if that breakdown of percentage is comparable to other communities, or if a DCC program is just so unique to each community that that's not really a metric that we can measure with neighboring communities.
Through the chair, I believe you have answered your question there. Because of the way the project lists do work, it is hard to compare the distribution of the projects and how much is allocated to the developers versus the municipality. Some municipalities may have a larger benefit allocation, and others may also increase the municipal assist factor. So in terms of comparing those two scenarios, it is comparing like apples to watermelons in the sense that a lot of these projects are pretty tailored, but the biggest cue is the comparison of the resulting rates, which I think is especially based on a lot of those comparison municipalities are undergoing updates or will have to undergo updates relatively soon. For example, the West Vancouver District DCC bylaw is dated from 1994. So it's all kind of nuanced in that. So I would say the district's at a pretty healthy standpoint when compared to other municipalities.
You just raised a lot of eyebrows in this room, Ms. Waite. Learning that about our neighbors to the south. Council, any other questions? All right. So the staff recommendation is that we give the District of Squamish Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 2911-2022 3 readings, and that we refer the Development Cost Charge Bylaw to the Inspector of Municipalities for review. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments? Councillor Stoner?
I'll just briefly speak to this through the mayor. We'll be supporting this recommendation, the motion on the floor. Thank you to staff and to our consultants for all of the work. DCCs are really complex, and it's been a long process that we've been undergoing this update, but it's really critical. This is how we get development to pay for the water, sewer, and other offsite infrastructure that we know we need. So thank you for the due diligence on the details here. I think that this gets us to a good point in terms of our overall rates in neighboring communities, or when compared to neighboring communities. And we layer this on top with our community amenity contribution policy to help cover some of those other things that our council colleagues have mentioned that are so critical to providing a healthy, happy community as we grow and develop. So this is just one part of the puzzle, but it's a really critical one. So thanks for the update.
Councillor French?
Thanks, Mayor. And speaking in favor of the motion, I feel that we've had thorough discussion about these rates leading up to get us to this point. And I'm pleased with all the work that has been done by staff, by the consultants, stakeholders. I'm just wanting to point out that it's important for residents to know that the development cost charges are reviewed regularly, and with growing interest in development opportunities in our community, we can be confident, I think, that these values will be revisited again soon to make sure that Squamish keeps the charges at appropriate levels, to make sure that Squamish gets appropriate value from future development. Thanks.
Councillor Anderson?
I have been an observer of probably 4 or 5 DCC bylaw reviews over the past decade, 12 years or so, and I see a steady improvement and not least in engagement. And I wanted to comment specifically about that. We have our development liaison committee that's referenced in the staff report, and these will likely be developers of primarily residential projects. These are people who come into municipal hall, very familiar with our staff, and more familiar than other development proponents might be as to our project approval processes. And for this reason, I'm very happy to see that for the first time, a meeting was deliberately set up with the Chamber of Commerce as a group that can represent or draw in the ICI sector. The best practices guide referred to in the staff report, in fact, does mention chambers of commerce as for example. They are listed there, and I think there's good reason for that. And so I'm happy to see that in particular, and I would hope to see that this is a routine that we can build on and improve our engagement processes even more as we go further. So I'm happy to approve to endorse the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Right. Happy to support this. I'm really pleased that we are completing this major overhaul to the DCC rates before the next election. I think one of the key things in a community that's growing quickly is that you always want to make sure you have up-to-date policy that's keeping up with your growth and reflecting that growth. So, so this is, I think, a gift to the next council, whoever is elected in October, so that they can focus on getting up to speed and determining their strategic plan. And their job really then is to keep on the lookout for the persistence of the inflationary pressures and make sure that any minor adjustments get made in subsequent years. But it's good to have this behind us. And next up is our CAC review, which again allows us to keep up with the growth pressures and the challenges that we're facing in the district. So appreciate everyone's work on this and the clarity with which you presented the information to us this evening. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Council, you can see that our finance staff are all here, but finance staff, we need a 10-minute recess just so you can have our full attention. So we'll be back at 8:15. Okay, we are back. We are on item 8A3. Our District of Squamish fees and charges bylaw, amendment bylaw number 2914-2022. I am turning over to our finance staff.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Roland Russell. I'm Senior Financial Analyst here at the district, and beside me is Heather Boxford, our Chief Financial Officer. Today we are requesting council to give 3 readings to the fees and charges bylaw amendment number 2914. The reason for this amendment is when we brought the fees and charges bylaw for the 2022 rates, it was presented to council in early December of 2021. Inadvertently, finance used the wrong bylaw template. There was a wording change after the 2020 rates were set that was requested or recommended by the planning department to align the wording within the user fees and charges bylaw with with changes made to the zoning bylaws. Most of these changes relate to the terminology around units and number of units in single family, multifamily, etc., and also associated with accessory dwelling units and bed and breakfast or short-term rentals. So to ensure that we are using the same wording in both the water bylaw and the sewer bylaw for the rates and fees, we need to update the sewer section of the rates and fees bylaw hopefully today. So that is the proposal that is before you. There are no changes to the numbers with respect to the rates that are in the bylaw. Those were adjusted appropriately. It was simply a matter of selecting the wrong template and using the wrong wording. So if council will be so generous, we would appreciate it if they would give 3 readings to this bylaw amendment today so that we could ensure that the wording is for both water and sewer are consistent and match that of our zoning bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Council, any questions about that in particular? All right, would someone like to move the staff recommendation? Moved by Councillor French, moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so now we move on to our property tax rates bylaw number 2913, 2022.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm still here. My name is Roland Russell, and I will be speaking to you this evening with respect to our property tax bylaw. So we want to point out a number of things with respect to the property tax bylaw. The first one is what council's options are with respect to setting property tax rates. We want to speak briefly about how tax assessment impacts properties. And we also want to speak briefly about the different municipal taxes that are collected when you receive your property tax notice. So the first comment we would like to make is that the calculation of the property tax rates is a two-step process. The first step, council approves the revenue requirements. Council approved the revenue requirements with the adoption of Bylaw 2904, the amendment to the 2022 through 2026 financial plan. And so that set our final tax revenue requirements for the year. In addition to that, Finance presented to council, I believe on the 19th of April of this year, different tax revenue distribution options. At that point in time, council decided to retain the existing distributions with respect to tax ratios and to have finance create the tax rates on that basis. So those are the rates that you see in the bylaw before you. So with those two things set, that determines what the tax ratios are going to be and what the revenue requirements are. And from there, we're able to calculate the tax rates as they apply to various classes. So you'll see before you the tax rates, municipal tax rates for the various classes that will appear in the bylaw and will be collected on people's tax bills. So the other item, I should just make a really quick note. Within the bylaw, we show these rates. There are additional rates over and above this, and we have a slide later which will outline those. So you can see general municipal, regional district, and regional hospital district. We'd like to speak briefly about the impact of assessment on people's taxes. So if your assessed value goes down less than the average, it is likely that your taxes will decrease. If your assessed value increase is greater than the average, then it's likely that your taxes will increase. And if yours is around the average, then it's likely that you won't see a significant change in taxes year to year. So there's been a fairly significant shift in residential assessment, especially both strata and single family in the past year or two. And so many different homeowners are going to see changes in their taxes from year to year. So this slide hopefully will help assist them have a better understanding of how that might impact their taxes this year. The last item we'd like to point out is that in any given year, the municipality collects taxes both for our own uses and also for a number of other jurisdictions. The largest one is for the municipality itself. The second largest one is for the school district. And then after that, we also collect taxes for the regional district, for regional hospitals, for the regional district itself, and we collect some money for provincial authorities. Those authorities would be Municipal Finance Authority and the BC Assessment Authority. So when you get your tax bill, you may point your finger at the municipality for that significant reduction that you've seen, clap, and you should remember that some of that could be the fault of the school board. And likewise, if it goes the other way. It's probably all the fault of the school board, but we'll take our share too. So thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation. I will pause here for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Council, we did spend some time in committee of the whole on the tax rates, but I'll entertain any questions now that you might have for staff. Not seeing any. So would someone like to move first 3 readings of our property tax rates? Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, wait, there's more. We're not done with the finance team yet. So we're moving on to the District of Squamish Alternative Municipal Tax Collection Scheme Bylaw number 2900 2022.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations at the District. I'm here today to present the District's 2022 Alternative Tax Collection Scheme Bylaw and corresponding amended utility bylaws. For the community and council's background, I'll first review the legislation. The Community Charter of BC legislates that a council may, by bylaw, establish an alternative tax scheme, which includes establishing discounts, penalties, and interest, and set terms which may differ between classes. If the district does not establish an alternative tax scheme by bylaw, 2022 property taxes are due on July 4th, and any unpaid amounts after this date are subject to a 10% penalty. At the Committee of the Whole meeting on Tuesday, April 19th, there was extensive discussion, after which Council directed staff to bring forward the district's pre-COVID-19 general alternative tax scheme and related utilities bylaws for first 3 readings. The key dates are property taxes and utility fees are due July 4th. A 5% penalty will be applied on balances outstanding after July 4th. And a second penalty applied on outstanding balances after the last day of July. Both penalties are 5%. The staff recommendation is that Council give first 3 readings to the district's alternative tax collection scheme and related utility bylaws. I'll now turn it over to Council for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sousa. Council, any questions? All right. We did discuss this just for the public's benefit at Committee of the Whole. So someone like to move first 3 readings of the alternative municipal tax collection scheme? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. And just briefly, is there any other presentations on the rest of them? We can just go through them now. All right, and this is just to align all of our sewer rates and regulation bylaw with this new tax scheme. So does someone want to move amendment bylaw number 2903 2022? By Councillor Ray, second by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. The Then amending our solid waste utility and regulation bylaw with amendment bylaw number 2902, 2022, moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, our water rates regulation and water extension bylaw. This would be amended by bylaw number 2901, 2022. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your presentations this evening. Council, we're on to 8B. This is a number of adoptions. First up is the District of Squamish zoning bylaw amendment for the patio program, bylaw number 2906, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Race. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish Land Development Procedures Bylaw, again for the patio program, number 2909, 2022. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. And again, for the patio program, this is District of Squamish Business License Bylaw, amending bylaw number 2908, 2022. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Pengill. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the fees and charges bylaw related to the patio program, amendment bylaw number 2907, 2022. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish traffic bylaw, again related to the patio program with amending bylaw number 2910, 2022. First to be adopted, moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. Nothing under item 9 tonight. Number 10 is our consent agenda. Council, anything on the consent agenda to which you are in conflict or which you want to pull for discussion? This is the time to do it. Councillor Stoner. Thank you. Any further ones? Councillor Race.
I'm in conflict on item B4.
Anything else? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to move the remaining items in the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll deal with those pulled items under item 13. There were no late agenda items. Correspondence with action requested that the correspondence from A. Brickwood be referred to the General Manager of Community Planning and Sustainability for investigation and response. This is regarding new parking signs on 2nd Avenue. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence from L. Roderick be referred to the Manager of Sustainability and Climate Change for investigation and response. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence from R. Forsyth be referred to the Director of Planning for investigation and response. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. That correspondence regarding the Norway Maple on Pemberton and 3rd be referred to the Director of Planning for investigation and response. Moved by Councillor Anderson. I'll second that. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that correspondence from M. Passmore be referred to the Director of Engineering for investigation and response with regard to pedestrian safety light at 2nd and Pemberton. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Stoner, would you like to speak to item 8?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pull this and highlight it to our community. It's dismal that we're going into the 4th month of the transit strike, and appreciate the mayors throughout the corridor continuing their advocacy to try and get the parties back to the table. I know we continue to get emails about the impact this is having on our community members, on our businesses, And I think that this letter is very powerful in trying to relate that to the folks that we need to get back to the table. So just wanted to say thanks to the mayor and our fellow mayoral colleagues up the corridor for willingness to write this and sign it to bring some further pressure on this really unfortunate matter.
Thanks, Councillor Stoner. You want
I
to
will
move
move receipt.
Seconded by Councillor French. Yep, go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Stoner, for drawing attention to this. In supporting it, want to point out that I've read in a number of places that the 3 municipal councils up and down the corridor have done nothing on this issue. And this letter just indicates that that's not accurate. I believe we all individually have taken action of some kind in reaching out to somebody. I know I have in reaching out to that the folks that are involved in this non-negotiation. So Councillor Stoner, thanks for shining a light on this and allowing us to just let the community know that we are doing something, we have done something, and we do care.
Thank you, councillors. This has probably been one of the most frustrating parts of this term for me. It is outside of our jurisdiction, and yet we feel the most pain at the local level, and we're not at the bargaining table, and we don't have the ability to require these two parties to come back together and actually negotiate and bargain in good faith. So it's I can assure you that the mayors in the corridor, we will continue every week to figure out a new way to continue to keep this front of mind for the province and for Unifor and PWT. I know our Chamber of Commerce has been very active as well, and both the Chamber and the district have formed emails on their pages that people can use to share their concerns and their challenges with PWT, Unifor, and key provincial ministers, as well as BC Transit. And we will continue to advocate for our residents until we see buses back on the road. Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, and just like that, I've heard similar feedback to Councillor French, where there's an assumption because people aren't seeing sort of very outward efforts necessarily. There's a lot more going behind the scenes, and I think what I'm seeing is more focus on things that are strategically effective. What I would suggest is for people who have concerns about where we are in transit and the importance, I think look at our spending and our plans for expansion and so on, and you will see how important transit has been to this council, and can rest assured that we are following up, and the mayor especially, with the most, I would say, strategic tactics to try and get things to the table. But it is a frustrating situation, because even the most strategic doesn't mean it's able to get us where we know we need to go.
Call the motion or call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Race, do you want to recuse yourself for this last one?
I will. I have declared a conflict with respect to this particular project before because I'm a potential purchaser at Waterfront Landing. Thank you.
Will someone move receipt? Move receipt by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. Could get Councillor Race back in the room. We have a number of recommended motions under item 14. So first up is the recommended motions from the April 12th Committee of the Whole. The first is the information report for 1039 Finch Drive. This is amendment bylaw number 2894, 2022, and that the application be given first and second reading. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Race. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. And the next one, Council direct staff to bring the 105. How many is okay? District of Squamish zoning bylaw amendment bylaw for 1005 and 1009 Raven Drive. back to a future committee of the whole for discussion. By Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the South Britannia Neighborhood OCP Amendment Bylaw and Zoning Amendment Bylaw from the SLRD for first reading referral be received for information and include the feedback from council as provided at the April 12th Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish receive the stage 1 engagement summary for the Squamish Marine Access Review and boat launching situational analysis. And that the district provide feedback and direction as we did, and areas and recommendations for part 2 of the Marine Access Review detailed on April 12th at the Committee of the Whole meeting. Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. That the next one is for the Mamquam Blind Channel dredging strategy, that we endorse the proposed engagement plan and initiate recruitment for a dredge program stakeholder working group as outlined at the April 12th Committee of the Whole meeting. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. The council received the lateral landfill expansion program update from April 12th. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we're on to the motions from April 19th. That the tax ratios presented on April 19th be incorporated into the district tax rate bylaw and be considered May 3rd. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Race. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next one is for the alternative tax scheme that we consider this May 3rd, which we have now done. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the recommended motions from the April 26th Committee of the Whole. The council, this was in regard to the moving beyond the car presentation. The council direct the mayor to write a letter to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, as well as the CEO and board chair of BC Transit, requesting ongoing increases in transit funding, including 3-year commitments to transit increases in order for local governments to plan appropriately. By Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Oh, there's a whole big slew of items under the Tantis Fire Hall budget update, grant application, and building above, so that we receive all that and do what it says. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. I'm not reading that all out. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish receive the Squamish Agri-Food Impact Study and provide feedback as requested on the April 26th. That would be Committee of the Whole, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Moved by Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the Committee of the Whole receive the April 26th report from Finance on the General Operating Reserve Policy. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw number 2838 be brought forward to regular council meeting for consideration of first 3 readings, incorporating feedback as provided by council. By Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. That the District of Squamish accept the Severe Weather Response, Climate Change Adaptation, and Disaster Risk Reduction Report from Emergency Planning, Engineering, Public Works, and Sustainability dated April 26th. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? We have nothing under item 16, nothing under item 17. We do not have any unscheduled public attendance. Any open question period? Anyone online at this point, Harley? No. Any council or staff announcements? Councillor French?
Thanks, Mayor. Quest graduation took place on Saturday, April 30th. You were in attendance representing the District of Squamish as a member of the platform party. Thanks for doing that. It was a ceremony to acknowledge the class of 2022, along with the classes of 2021 and 2020, as the graduates from those years were denied a proper graduation ceremony because of COVID-19 restrictions. I just want to share that of particular note is the fact that 5 Squamish students participated in the ceremony and received their degrees. And the first Quest honorary degree was presented during the event. Ogatami Chesha was presented with the honorary degree, and many of you will better know her as Squamish Nation Elder Gwen Harry. And Hereditary Chief Pakulton Siam was named the new Chancellor. So Chief Dale Harry will now lead the Board of Directors at Quest. And the new owner of the Quest property, Peter Chung, attended along with his wife, Stephanie. I thought it was a great event, and I want to congratulate all those who worked hard over their 4 years of education at Quest to receive their Bachelor of Arts and Sciences degree.
I might just add an addendum to that. That was the last graduation for Dr. George Iwama, who is retiring at the end of this summer. And I just wish him a very pleasant time fishing and spending time with his family. And he has been through a lot in the last 5 years since he's taken the helm at Quest. He has seen them through the CCA proceedings, a pandemic, and his own very horrible car accident, and his recovery is ongoing. And he's just, you could tell at the event how loved he is on that campus and the impact he's had. So it was great to be a part of the platform with him and help to celebrate his accomplishments as president of the university. So thank you for speaking to that, Councillor French. Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I just briefly want to mention that I was at the Checkmate Center open house on Sunday, and it is such a wonderful event. I actually, they open up so much of their property, but the Longhouse in particular, they have weaving going on. You're able to cook bannock over the fire with your community members, which was so fantastic. And I hadn't actually been inside the Longhouse since I was in grade 4, and we did a school trip. So it was brought back lots of memories to be back in the Longhouse. So just thanks to everybody who puts on that event. It's such a great day.
Councillor Pettengill and then Councillor Race.
Yeah, just reminded, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago, the Lions Club helped out the Easter Steels camp with a shredding fundraiser, and working from home on sometimes sensitive topics. I had a growing pile of sensitive documents that overgrew the capacity of my own shredder, and we have to move. And so I was, what do I do with this? And this came along at the perfect time, and they had a great system set up, and I'm so thankful that they were doing that, and great to see that fundraiser seemed successful, a beautiful day. So thank you to Lions Club and the Easter Seals camp.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. On April 24th, a week ago Sunday, I attended Workers' Memorial for workers who have died either on the job or through job-related illnesses at Junction Park. And it is a little bit moving for me, a little bit personal, because as I look down the list on the cairn, some of those people are acquaintances I've known or known of. Some of them are former clients of mine, and a couple of them former friends of mine. And so it is a personal thing for me, but it does highlight, I think, the need to continue our efforts to make workplaces safe for the people who are there. And it was attended by representatives of CUPE, other unions in the area, WorkSafe BC, and Squamish District Labor Council. A nice event.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Anderson.
On Saturday, at least 20, they're represented. I'm not sure about whether we're all volunteers, and including my colleagues as well, of course. But I think, and this is something we reflected on in an earlier conversation today, that we should try to do more to better organize opportunities for recruiting volunteers, including among our youth. That wasn't particularly a theme for this very successful event, but it was clear that we're all old hands and maybe that we need new ways to bring out new faces, including to such events. But it was a great success. Hats off to the organizers.
And I will finish it off just thinking that it's a good thing there's 7 of us with so much going on in the community now. I was also at the Minor Hockey Awards, handing out awards on the evening of Saturday, the 30th. And I just really want to extend my thanks to all the coaches and team managers. So many parents put in just countless hours supporting minor hockey in our community. Really grateful for that. And it was great just to see all those kids and their coaches enjoy pizza and donuts and get some awards. So anyway, I'm really pleased that more and more events are starting to happen face to face in our community, and hope that as many of us as possible can get out to some of them. I think we need a running list of like what we can do each weekend. I think the calendar is getting crowded, but thanks everyone for being out and about and with our community. With that, we've finished our closed meeting, so motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff who supported us tonight and the public who participated.